Bill Budge and Nasser Jabeli and Mark Trammell and a lot of those guys there. And there was probably like 40 or 50 people, and everybody knew who everybody else was, but they'd never actually seen them in person at that event. And I did a lot of video interviewing during that event, but 2 people died 2 months before the event, and that was super unfortunate. That was Dan Bunton, Daniel Berry, and Jim Nichols, and those would have been some amazing interviews to have. But I do have I have interviews from 10 years ago or 12 years ago that I'll be putting up as well.
Wow. I mean, it sounds like there's urgency. It's also fascinating to me that unlike like having an archivist or a librarian, right, that it's really, you're looking for who really understand code and understand the moment.
Yeah, people that have made stuff on that platform. Hopefully somebody that person knows. Right. Like if there was going to be an interview of a Commodore 64 programmer, like I've coded the Commodore 64, but I'm pretty sure I could get Ron Gilbert, who was was an expert Commodore 64 person, to help interview that other person. So those are the kind of interviews that we would be doing, is some people that know everything, just taking them apart, basically. Everything that they did, just take it apart and get all of it down. Basically find out how they did their stuff.
Wow. Other questions? Yeah.
Did you ever have a crazy game design idea that really never got to make?
Not really. I don't usually have. If I have crazy game ideas, I usually know that there's no way I'm going to make them. It'd be funny if we made something like this. But usually it's not something I really want to play. Because if there's something I really want to play, that's the game I'm going to make.
Let's see. I see a hand up really high.
There.
Yeah, I do.
Okay. So a lot of these guys that you're interviewing from back in the day, do you find that they're still interested in games today? Are they still either actively or inactively participating in game culture and game development?
Some of them are, but most of them aren't. It's kind of interesting. Like some of the people go on to do other stuff. Like Warren Robinette, like I had mentioned Warren, and he had done stuff for like the early 80s up until like the crash of 83, 84. And he was a mathematician, so I think he's a PhD. And what he's working on right now is nothing to do with games, although he is still very interested in games, and he has written up some interesting game designs that he has really wanted to make, but it hasn't really gone after it. But Warren Robinette, he works in HP's R&D department, and he lives in like North Carolina, and he flies to Palo Alto like every week out of the month. So he's kind of close where I'm at, which is in Silicon Valley. And Warren, going from games in the very early 80s, now he's doing this R&D research stuff. And one of the previous thing he was working on was like trying to think. It's like it's lossy memory, like using like biological components to hold data and be able to lose a lot of bits but still retain the data. And then the latest thing that he got on, just like within the last 3 years or whatever, is called memristors. I don't know if anyone here has heard of memristors, but it kind of exploded in 2008 and is going to change like all of our hardware pretty soon. But it's basically he's writing a lot of the test code for the 4th fundamental unit of electronics that they just discovered. Like there's three basic component building blocks of electronics that all the electronics books have been written about for years. But there are all these artifacts that would happen, and they would explain in the books these artifacts at a certain point. They're unexplained, and they're unexplained because they didn't have the technology to actually know that there was a 4th fundamental component that affected everything. And so they found it out. It was theorized in 1973 in Berkeley, and then they found it in 2008. And now they have to rewrite all the electronics books. And the most exciting thing about it is it's basically the way that we have flash memory right now, which is made up of millions of transistors and components to basically hold data without power. The memristor by nature holds memory without power. So it's a fundamental building block that you turn power on to change the state, and then when you turn power off, it keeps its state, which means that computers and everything can just be super low power, and they only can just turn on the whole thing immediately without having a million transistors, to build up that kind of component.
Wow.
So memristors is the name of it.
Ooh, memristors. Everybody remember
Memory
that?
resistor.
Memory resistors. Memristors. There's some hands up way in the back, and I can't really see you guys because of the light, but I want to make sure that some folks back here. Yeah.
So I was wondering, you at 11 years old, you were a game maker. What was your relationship with games as a player? Did you actually find time to play games? What's your...
Yeah, so Steph. When I started making games, the reason why I started making games is because I was massively addicted to games. And that was thank you arcade culture back in the late 70s, early 80s. So I was super addicted to games, and I was playing them all the time. And found out that you could actually program a computer, and make them. So that's why I got into it. And I kept playing games all the time. And I would come home from school, and it was like play games, go home, code games, and it was until as late as I could every single day. I played them all the time, programmed them all the time. In school, I'd be at school with notebooks, and in class I would just code all day, and I got really bad grades. Because whatever went in my head, if it's somehow background processed, then that would come out on a test, hopefully, as something. But I was always in class writing code. I never sat in class. I never did homework the entire time I was in school. I never paid attention in class. I was always writing code. The teacher thought I was writing down what they were saying probably, but I was writing 6502 assembly and drawing little characters, and when I got home, I typed it all in, and then continued from there and just did it the next day, and I did it for years. I never stopped doing it. So school was, I already knew what I wanted to do, so why did I need to learn stuff in school?
Wow, awesome. Are you playing stuff now? What are you playing?
Really, World of Warcraft is. It's been 5 years I've been playing.
Oh my God.
In the last few months, I
How
haven't
many
played
level
so much.
80s do you have?
I have 5 80s right now. Yeah. The lead programmer on WoW used to work for me. He worked on Quake. That's, I believe World of Warcraft is one of the best design games ever. Even though it's got a simple pattern that geographically expands and everything, it's just to hold a game that big together and to be able to expand it and stuff is a really great design. And it's an amazing program. I mean, just the client side software is the most optimized piece of code ever written.
The most important question about that is Border Alliance.
Alliance.
Okay.
And I only play women.
Oh.
All my characters are female. I'm not going to look at some dude's
Do you have a
ass for
main?
like 5
Do you have a main that you...
I have several mains, because all 80s are fully outfitted with everything on both specs and PvP. So I spent a lot of time.
Nice. I saw some hands pop up right here in front.
Yes, I kind of want to ask a personal question about what do you think about the history of the first-person shooters, since most people say that Wolfenstein 3 is one of the first real first-person shooters that's about gunning things down. What do you think about how the genre has evolved in itself? What games have evolved the genre as well? What do you think they've done right and what they've done wrong?
So, post Wolfenstein in FPS, because I think a lot of people count Wolfenstein as the first FPS. Was it the first-person shooter? Even in 1978, there was a game called Tail Gunner that was a really great first-person shooter on the back of a ship that kind of looked like Red Baron. And people played Battlezone, and so shooting in first person had been there for a while, but not at home, and it didn't have the kind of fiction that we wrapped around with Wolfenstein. It's like you're trying to escape a Nazi dungeon, and that was interesting. And also the focus on high speed, I think, is one of the things that really broke it out because a week before Wolfenstein came out, Ultima Underworld had come out, and it had a full 6 Degrees of Freedom engine and everything. It just was kind of slow. You couldn't see that much in front of you. There was texture warping when it got up near the walls, but it was doing something beyond what we were doing, but we did ours simply and very, very fast, and that was more interesting, I think, to like the feel of that game and what that kind of game was all about. And then going past, I'd say, I think Dark Forces was pretty awesome. I really like Dark Forces because that was one of the very first games that we hadn't co-created like Heretic. That was one of the first games to show what you could do with another IP. Like you could take Star Wars and put it in an FPS. That was the first time someone had done that, and it was awesome. And then I think the Outlaws was great because it was a Western FPS, and it was done very, very well. The soundtrack was amazing. Duke Nukem 3D was like a watershed kind of game. It had all the multiplayer options that you could ever hope for in an FPS, and it had great character. Just Duke Nukem himself was just great to have a character that was wisecracking, and he was just awesome, and he knew he was awesome. And then post Quake, I really think Half-Life obviously was amazing, but for me I think Half-Life 2 came out in 2004. Still for me that has been the pinnacle of FPS. I haven't seen anything past Half-Life 2. So there's been 6 years and there have been a lot of FPSs past that point, but nobody has taken their formula and even replicated that formula. They used the formula from 1998 to make Half-Life 2, and in between 98 and 2004, nobody took the formula and used it. And so they used it again in 2004 and did it even better. I'm pretty sure they're planning on doing it again with 3. And I'm just kind of blown away that people have not taken that formula and just like, here's how you do cinematics. Here's how you playing cats with dog, and just all the really cool stuff that they put in that game. Just amazing. So up to 2004, past that point, Crysis, Far Cry 2, they're okay. They're interesting, but they're not as groundbreaking and like the best. Like if anybody asks me, I always tell them Half-Life 2 is the best FPS made so far.
You heard it here. We're kind of running out of time. I know we've got a session after this, but John, thank you so much.
Thank you.
And thank you for leading us through such a fascinating hour. Thanks so much, John. It's really terrific to have John involved in IndieCade. You're a terrific patron, great friend of the festival and conference. Thanks so much. What a cultural code warrior.
Yeah, I like that. That's a good title.
So, guys, we'll be changing over now. Please come back.